You're listening to Bigfoot Society, and I'm Jeremiah Byron. In this show, we go beyond the campfire stories to bring you firsthand encounters from people who say they've seen something impossible, from backwoods trails and remote mountain haulers to quiet farms and crowded highways. The stories come from everywhere, and each one leaves us with more questions than answers. These are the voices of the people who've lived it, so settle in, because today you'll hear another account that just might change the way you see the woods forever. So stay with us. All right, Bigfoot Society, we've got the privilege of talking to Terri today. Terri is out there from Lane County, Oregon, and we got connected after I saw Terri's comment on a recent Oregon episode, and she's got some really interesting things to share about the Lowell Fall Creek Lookout Point Lake area, which is just to the west of Oak Ridge there. So a lot of really interesting things are going to be shared in this one. I know we've talked a little bit off record already, but welcome to the show, Terri. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Absolutely. As you probably know, this is one of my favorite places to talk about. I just really love this area, Oak Ridge, and I always drive. I have to drive from Eugene to Oak Ridge, and I always drive by this reservoir. And it's like, once you hit, the last time especially, once I hit this area, I was like, when is it going to feel weird again? And it was like, bam, once you hit that reservoir on 58, something about it, I was like, oh, it's right now. It's just such a fun, weird area. And one of these days, I need to cross that bridge and go over into Lowell and Wineberry and Fall Creek and see what is going on over there. So we'll see. Maybe that'll happen in the future. But, Terri, I would love to hear what you've experienced. Feel free, to take us back as far back as you want to, when you first started experiencing some things out of the ordinary in this area.
Okay. My husband and I and my family have hunted in the Fall Creek, Wineberry, Lookout, Oak Ridge area for as long as I can remember. And I've always had a feeling, that maybe there is something different. Well, in October of 2003, my husband and I, we were elk hunting, and it was maybe mid-afternoon, getting towards maybe 3-4 o'clock. And our hunting party just kind of split up for the day because we'd been having kind of a time and not really seeing much for animals. And so my husband and I said, well, let's make one more loop and we'll go down around Wimble Pass. Anybody who is familiar with the area knows that Wimble Pass goes from the top of Butte Disappointment, as it's called, but we call it Lowell Butte. And it drops down the north side to Wineberry Road, which goes around Big Fall Creek Reservoir. So we decided to go up. So we went up and we got an opportunity to see a bull elk. So that didn't pan out for us. So we turned around and we went back down, and then we took this road that would take us towards the end of Lowell Butte. And we happened to look up in this big, huge cutting, and we're looking up saying, why is someone out there in black? This is bear season, thinking somebody's just out there running around looking for mushrooms or something. So we pulled up to the landing, stopped and got out, and I looked up. And what I was seeing, I did not believe I was seeing. The feelings that I had were not like to get my gun or anything like that. I didn't feel like I was threatened. It was more or less like we were locked on each other's eyes. It was probably, I don't know if it was a he, but it was probably maybe 200 yards away. And it looked like it was only maybe 100 yards away because of the size. And just as I went to look over to get my binoculars. And as I was putting them up to my face, it did the typical Bigfoot turn and step to go behind a big brush pile. And we know brush piles aren't small. And after that occurrence, I didn't know if I wanted to go back in the woods again. I was like scared, and it changes you, completely changes how you look at things after that. So now I'm intrigued. I want to see one again. And I have found out that my husband, a family friend, have also had experiences on the same ridgeline. Our family friend had rocks thrown at him. He thought it was my brother messing with him. He turned around and was storming back up to the truck, and my brother was sitting there on the tailgate, smoking a cigarette, not even winded. And then my husband had something behind some vine maples going back and forth. And he thought for sure it was an elk, but there was no odor or anything. But he said whatever it was wouldn't come out, and it was pretty heavy. Like I said, we've been in these mountains for a long, long time. There is someone who used to live up Windberry Creek. I don't know if they still do. And I've never seen him. I haven't seen him in probably 15 years. And I would actually like to talk to him sometime, because he always drove around and he had a Bigfoot figurine in his vehicle. And I am just curious, as if, there wasn't something going on there. But anyway, getting back on track. We had a rock thrown at our vehicle when we were out hunting. It was on an uphill grade, and we were on a corner, and it directly hit the side of the pickup. And there were marks and everything. We looked around, nothing. And let's see, we camped up at Fall Creek Reservoir. We've heard whoops, and we've heard trees falling over. We've heard big splashes in the water. I know someone who used to work for Oregon State Parks up there, and she said after every season that they were closed, when they would go there to open and get things cleaned up, pick up branches or whatever, there were some awfully weird things that, like structures and little innuendos that were left around. And she said it was quite interesting at times. And off of Wimble Pass, I was at the vehicle. My husband and our friend were off walking down through the woods, and everything was quiet, and there was wood knocks going on. And this was right after we had our encounter. And so I was a little scared, so I got back in the truck. And now it's like I'm going around listening for stuff, looking for stuff. But I have definitely had my fair share of encounters. So sorry if I jumped around a little bit, but if you have any questions, Jeremiah, just jump right in. But and I wanted to mention that my very first encounter, which I didn't realize at the time what it was when I think I had just graduated high school, and I was sitting in the driveway with my boyfriend, and I hear something behind us, and I turn around and look, and there's this black silhouette that was bigger than any man that I've ever seen. And my boyfriend had said something like, who are you or what do you want? And by the time we turned the vehicle around, whoever that was gone, completely gone. So that was my very first experience, which I had forgotten about that, and I had put it way back, and I just actually remembered it like about 2 months ago. I've heard people mention this on this podcast before, and I didn't realize it until I was just like, you know what? I've had other experiences. Why didn't I notice that? And I have camped at Ivan Oaks before, which I know that there's another report out of Ivan Oaks. I never had any experiences there, but, and maybe I wasn't noticing then, but it's a really neat area. And, sometime, I want to go back, and I just want to take my time and kind of hang out and do some own research of my own. But, I think that's probably everything that I have experienced in a nutshell, but I am, looking to experience more. So I think that's all I have. Yeah.
There is a lot that was just shared in that amount of time. I want to say thank you, Terri, for sharing that. We have a lot of stuff to go over. So you had mentioned your earlier sightings to me before the recording started. Are you comfortable to share, because it's a different town where that sighting happened in high school?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It was just outside of Jasper, up Wallace Creek Road. And our house was probably 2.5 miles off the main road up towards the top of the canyon. So what it looks like is that when you're driving along Wallace Creek Road, it's kind of flat and everything. And then right before you would turn off to go to on our road to go to our house, you would start winding up the canyon and going upgrade. And then our property was on the left-hand side, kind of on a hillside. So, and there was a creek that ran down Wallace Creek Road, which, of course, Wallace Creek. And that was at our 20-acre homestead just outside of Jasper. And that was probably 1986 or 7.
Gotcha. I know of at least one other sighting that's happened around Jasper. It was much more recent. I believe they saw one running on the side of a hill, and it was running super, super fast. I can't remember the exact year. I'd have to look. Listeners will definitely want to look at the sighting map that's on Bigfoot Society Podcast.com. And if you look at the Fall Creek Lowell area, Winberry, you'll notice how many different things have been on the show already. And it's not up to date yet. I still have a few hundred shows to go through. But so you mentioned Ivan Oaks, but there's also, let's see, so specifically Wimble Pass. Now, there was a gentleman I talked to back in not too long ago, is episode 886, and he shared something that happened on Winberry Creek Road, which was by a cattle guard pull-off, and they were just surrounded with whoops and footfalls and just crazy, crazy stuff happening. And it sounds like that's very close to where your situation happened as well.
Yes. If you look at a map, you drive 58 quite a bit.
Yep.
You know where the butte is? There, a little butte with all the towers on it.
Okay.
Okay. So if you follow that back as you're driving 58 and you're looking over there, that whole ridge line that goes, it goes way, way up there, almost to Buckhead Park, which is up by West Fur. Where he's talking about is just right over like the middle of that range there, up Winberry Creek Road. There is an old, I think there's family members that still live up there. And I know exactly where he's talking about. And that would be just right down the hill from where my experience happened and where the other experiences happened of people that I know.
Wow.
So it really doesn't surprise me, but I'm glad that, to hear that there's still stuff going on, for sure.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, other things that have happened, there was the postal worker in 2014, I believe, that had the sighting, and then the park ranger said, yeah, we had 14 other calls from your area just last night. And it's just, that whole area is just absolutely wild, wild, wild. So thinking back to what you saw, did it line up with what, let's say if someone before had been like, hey, before you've actually seen a Bigfoot, you're like, oh, you're going to see a Bigfoot. And you have that picture in your mind of what pop culture thinks. Did it line up with what you saw that day, or was it different at all in any way?
It was exactly what I would think that it would look like. An upright bipedal, hairy, person, it didn't have the real pointy cone head. Of course, I mean, if it did, I couldn't tell because of the distance, but there was, no mistaking what it was at all. I knew exactly what I was looking at. And my husband's still kind of like reserved, that, he wants more proof. And I'm like, you can't get more proof than that.
No, absolutely.
It was amazing, but yet, it changes you. And I don't know if you've heard people say that before, but, it changes how you look at stuff.
Oh, sure. 100%. Were you able to get a feel for what color it was?
Black.
Okay.
Black as night.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Have you heard of any sightings in that same area of like one that would be more kind of blonde, strawberry blonde at all?
I haven't.
It's really weird. If there's, I'm struggling to think of the number because it's an older episode, but there's a sighting of a strawberry blonde one in that same Fall Creek area. Oh, wow. Man, the other thing I want to throw out just in case the right person is listening is the first time I was at Sasquatch Summerfest in Oak Ridge, I had these individuals tell me that there was actually in the 70s, there was the university in Eugene did a study of sightings of the Windberry wild man, which is pretty much the other name, I guess, for the Bigfoot in that area. But I've not been able to track that information down. If anyone listening knows, I'd love to try to get access to it or how to read or listen to those reports. But just throwing that out there as well. Can you explain a little bit about what did the whoops sound like that you heard around the reservoir?
They were just like, it was something that we had never heard before in the woods. And now when I hear noises, it's almost like, okay, do I recognize that? It was just, really like, it wasn't a high pitch, and it was just like, well, just like that.
Okay. Gotcha.
And then, it was just a little bit more subtle than that. Of course, I don't have a deep voice, but yeah, it was just like that. And it was just a few times, and the park ranger that we're good friends with, said, that it's not unusual. And a lot of people that camp up there don't know what that noise is. And so, they just don't even recognize it. So
that's a big thing for that individual to say that it's not unusual, in that people are hearing whatever so it's not just a one-off. There are multiple people hearing this sound, these whoops. And did it sound like anything you would hear in a zoo at all?
I haven't been to a zoo since I was a kid.
Gotcha.
I honestly, I can't answer that. I mean, I don't know. Possibly.
I say that because I was just out on an overnight, and I actually did. It was a really active area, and I captured and I recorded a whoop. But the thing is that a lot of people, when they say I heard a whoop, they'll say maybe it sounds like a gibbon call. If you've heard like a gibbon in the zoo, the one I captured sounded more like a singular drop of water. But the signature, when you look at it in like Audacity or a sound spectrogram program, it's the same signature as a whoop will be every time. All right, this is Jeremiah editing the episode. I'm going to go ahead and throw in the noise that I captured in an undisclosed location in Iowa. This was also recorded at 3:48 a.m. in the morning. There's no one else in the primitive campground with me. The first 20 seconds you'll hear is the actual unedited audio. So it's very hard to hear. It's about 9 seconds in. Then you'll hear a 4-second clip that'll repeat a few times where it's amplified. So here you go. So that experiencing that recently has made me kind of ask questions a little differently about like, okay, what kind of whoop did you hear? If you know what I mean. So.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Because, there's different vocal tones too. And a different whoop can, mean something, how many different whoops there are out there. This whoop could mean that, or this whoop could mean this. You don't really know, but I mean, the main thing is that we're recognizing them.
It really is, and man, it's such an interesting thing. And I'm just going to talk for a minute, but it's interesting because you have this area which is totally just soaked in Bigfoot activity. If you're looking from Fall Creek over to Oak Ridge, and I mean, you look at, I've talked to the rangers a few times in the ranger station. They have Bigfoot posters up in the actual place, like where you walk into behind the desk, there's Bigfoot paraphernalia up. So there's definitely stuff that is known. I think it comes down to having those relationships and being able to talk to the right people, and the right people might talk to someone like you more so because you live there, as opposed to a guy who flies in one time a year from Iowa with his podcast. Right. But,
yeah,
the same guy that you talked to about the whoops, has he said anything about people reporting sightings up in that area as well?
No, I had never asked back at that time. It was one of those things to where, you didn't talk about it. I kept my encounter to myself for many years, and I just, dealt with it until, someone would pop up a conversation and then start talking about stuff. And then it would come out that, my husband and I had this experience. And so then as years have went by and it's becoming, people are becoming more aware. There's more, people talking about it. Now it seems that as if people are more comfortable talking about it now.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I agree 100%.
So, yeah.
100%.
Yeah. So it wasn't something that we had regular conversations about.
And so this conversation, that would have been back closer to 2003, you're saying?
The conversations that we had with our park ranger friend was probably we moved to Central Oregon in 2016, so probably mid-2000s.
Oh, okay. Wow, yeah, so not too bad.
So it was more current, like maybe 2008 to 2012, 13.
Very interesting. What do you think is the most recent activity you've heard of personally in that area?
Honestly, I haven't had anybody mention anything to me from, like the Winbury area.
Mm-hmm.
I have been trying to find areas of activity over here in Central Oregon, and so I'm not really in touch with many people on the west side of the Cascades.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on for sure. I don't know if you've ever made it down to the Area 58 Museum in Oak Ridge yet. That's a good group of people to talk to about the area as well. Pretty close.
I haven't.
Area. Yeah, you should check it out. It's great. So it's really what it is a Bigfoot museum for the area, headed up by Priscilla, who also heads up the Sasquatch Summerfest Festival in Oak Ridge every year. So they have it's right next to the DQ in Oak Ridge. So you should really check it out. You'd love it.
Okay. Yeah, I actually should.
Great people to talk to for sure. So you mentioned so you guys are elk hunters, and so you go all over the area. You also mentioned that you've hunted over in Oak Ridge. Have you had anything weird or out of the ordinary happen over there on that side?
No, it's been down from like Ivan Oaks over to Winbury and then down to Lowell.
Okay.
It's been on that lower end.
Gotcha. One thing I like to throw out on interviews in this area, just in case, I've had some people throw out that they've seen other things in that area, but they never want to go on record about it. And so we're not talking like Bigfoot, but we're talking about like maybe weird stuff like fairies or trolls or gnomes or anything like that. Is that anything that you've ever heard of walking around?
I have not. The only thing out of the ordinary that I've seen is we were camping at Cascara Campground there on Fall Creek Reservoir. And right after dusk, we saw a red light that was hovering. And when it started to lower towards the tree line, which was, as a crow flies, probably maybe 8-10 miles away from us, we could see the trees illuminate. And as it descended and got closer to the trees, there was more light being spread out through the trees. And then just in a snap, it was gone.
Oh, that's weird.
That was the only other out of the ordinary thing I've seen besides a rabbit and a squirrel chasing each other. But,
Gotcha. Yeah, no, that's, I've gotten a few UFO things out of Oak Ridge, but you hear a lot of the light stuff like up in, like McKinsey Bridge, Rainbow, Finn Rock area, all that kind of further north of you guys. That's where I get a lot of that stuff. But man, that is really cool. Do you have any thoughts about why there might be a ton of Bigfoot activity in the area around like Fall Creek and the reservoirs?
Sure. My thought is that you have Lookout Reservoir and you have Fall Creek Reservoir on each side of a heavily timbered, wooded, brushy ridgeline. And on either side, you've got access to water, food, and then on the ridgeline, you have, the timber, the brush for security, for concealment, the habitat. And so, and then you have your food sources, deer, elk, and whatnot. So I think that because it's such a hot spot there, that is why, because there's all kinds of resources there to survive.
When you say food, what would you be referring to?
Like fish out of the lakes, water, and then your deer and elk, birds, rabbits, all kinds of food sources, and berries. There's tons of berries up there. Everywhere you look, there's blackberry vines, and that's where we would get all of our blackberries ourselves. So yeah, there's a lot of food sources there.
Gotcha. This question, I could always look it up through the census, but since you are familiar with the area, what's your approximation for the amount of people that live on the other side of the reservoir in this area? Like, Fall Creek, Lowell, all that area.
Fall Creek, Winberry. Let's start at, if you don't mind, I'll start at Lookout, because on the Boundary Road, there is, last I knew, between milepost 1 and milepost 5, I believe there was only like maybe 4 residences at the time, full-time residences. Then when you hop over Wimble Pass to Winberry, you've got probably, I'm going to say 6 from the bridge clear up past the cattle guard. And then between Winberry and Big Fall Creek, over where the campground is, there's probably a handful. And then I don't believe that there are any alongside the other part of the reservoir until you get down below the dam. So there's really not that many. And then up Big Fall Creek towards the campgrounds like Dolly Varden and those, there are residences up there, and they're up there quite a ways. So, I mean, yeah, there's not many, but there is a few.
Wow, that was way less than I was thinking, to be honest. That's pretty wild, because, man, I can't imagine. Some of those people are probably being messed with at their houses, or having some interactions based on.
I would think so.
Yeah, I would think so too. That's crazy. If they're listening, they can always reach out for sure. And then Lowell, is Lowell kind of the size of Oak Ridge, or a little bit? It's smaller, isn't it?
Lowell is probably about that. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
I would think so. And Little Fall Creek, it's hard to say, because the way the county goes, so some people might be considered Lowell, and then some people might be considered Fall Creek. So it's really, kind of difficult to tell. But yeah, they're. I would say it's probably about the same for sure.
Based on what you've seen and what you've experienced, do you have any thoughts about? We know that it's what it's called, either Bigfoot or Sasquatch, but do you have any thoughts about what we are dealing with when we're talking about whatever that creature is?
Yeah, I mean, I think that somewhere something's got to give, because it's like, nobody wants to hurt them, as far as I know, and we just want to know what they're about. That's what I'm wondering. I think of them as Bigfoot. And the mystery continues.
Oh, absolutely. And it's one of the best ones. I mean, no matter if you think of it as there's a bunch of undiscovered apes out there, or, feral people, or cousins to human beings that have just gone into the woods and haven't come out. There's so many ways to think about it. And it is really cool. I hope that you are able to have another interaction. It sounds like you are actively pursuing after it. And I mean, if you're able to go to this area, you really are in the right area. And if you're able to talk to Priscilla and those guys over in Oak Ridge, they might be able to give you some cool information as well. But it has been really fun talking to you today, Terri, and it's just cool to hear more from this area of Lowell in Fall Creek. And if people listening, again, if you know more information about this area, or really any area in the region, feel free to reach out to me. You can send me an email at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. But Terri, I want to make sure that you were able to share everything that you came on the show to share today.
Yes, I did, and I thank you so very much.
Hey, how's it going?
What's up, man?
Hey, good. How are you?
I'm doing good. I just you've been popping up on my For You page, so I figured I'd check
Awesome.
you out.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming out.
Yeah, I got a little channel I've been running. I live here in Appalachia, in Putnam County, West Virginia, and yeah, man, I've been having a lot of activity up through here. It's been nuts for the past few years.
Oh my goodness. Do you have any any experiences that you could share?
Oh yeah, sure. I don't know how long they've been around my property until I started noticing them. I've lived here for probably 10 years now, but back 5 years ago, I'd let my dogs out, and they'd went up into the woods, and they were barking. And so I went to go retrieve them out of the woods, and I was standing right next to this big white oak tree, and I was just happened to look off to the left, and there was like this little death leg, like a little hill, and a Sasquatch popped up over the hill, and he was probably about 15 feet from me. And it was a little juvenile. He's probably about 5 foot tall. And I just remember what he looked like. He smirked on his face, and then he stepped 6 foot, about 6 foot to its left, and got behind a big tree. And I was sitting there watching him, and every so often I would see his arm flare out, and I could tell that he was backing out of the woods. That's a military maneuver, man. He was freaking using that tree. He put that tree in between me and him, and he egressed out in the woods. And I could tell he was walking out because his arms were getting smaller and smaller. So, I mean, that is a high degree of intelligence, you know what I mean? And it just blew my mind then. And so then I started looking for him every time. After I had that experience, I just kept looking for him, constantly looking up in the woods.
Wow. So you got a good look at his face. Do you remember, was it covered with hair, or were there parts that didn't have hair?
Oh, I know exactly what he looks like. He was jet black, but his chest was gray, like a lighter gray color, and his face, same way, jet black. His ears had a little tip on their ears that was hairless on top of his ears, and his face, he had it was two-tone color, like it was his hair was black, and then right around his eyes and down around his nose, and like the opposite of goatee area, you know what I'm saying, is was like a lighter gray color. His chest was gray and muscular. I mean, I could tell he was a juvenile, but man, he was already built. You know what I mean? You could tell he had strength in his hands. His nails were black. Um, his eyes, he had like an amber color eyes, but they were larger. His pupils were enormous, like compared to ours. You know, they had big eyeballs and and a very prominent, uh, like eyebrow ridge. You know what I'm saying? Very thick bone. You could
Uh,
tell it's pretty muscular type. I hate to say ape, it's because that's not really a good way to explain them, but you know, like the apes have that larger eyebrow, you know, temple area is real swollen and muscular. It kind of look like that. And yeah, he noticed me and he smirked like he was surprised that I was able to see him. I mean, it wasn't nothing special like I did anything special. It was just I was hiding. I wasn't even really hiding. It was just I was standing and there was a white oak tree in between me and it, and I could see around the white oak tree, but it was, you know, my silhouette was so small that he didn't notice me right away, and he walked a few steps up over the hill before he realized I was there. And yeah, it was. I couldn't believe what I seen. You know what I mean? And then I started gifting apples and stuff, and I've had quite a bit of experiences since then. I had the little baby juveniles riding on my poodle. They got on her back and was riding her across the yard. Um, they would ride her back. The babies would, and they would run along the tree line. I got a video up on my channel about it. It shows them riding on my dog's back. It was crazy.
really?
Yeah, absolutely. Um,
Goodness.
but yeah, they seem pretty friendly. You know that I've not had no um, I've not got no evil intent or nothing like that from them. Maybe except one time, they grunted real loud at me when I got too close to one of their kids. That was down in the brush on my property. One of the little juveniles would get on the roof of my house. I got a video of him up on the roof of my house. Um, oh, uh, so after that, I really didn't know what their intent was. So, you know, I was constantly worried about my dogs because, you know, I had four little dogs and I just let them out the back door and you know, I didn't put no leashes on them or nothing. I just let them go. But now that I know those damn Sasquatch are there, I was worried about letting them out without a leash. I didn't know if they'd hurt them or not, you know, until I started seeing them, the kids playing with them and whatnot. And I
Which
realized they wasn't going to hurt them. Then I don't put them on a leash no more. But yeah, man, it was kind of scary there for a little bit, not knowing what I was dealing with.
Oh, absolutely.
Not too long ago, it's probably been a month ago. I was I just fed my dogs and everything. It was like 8:30, and sorry, I just heard something. I'm out on my back porch, but I heard some noise outside, and I ran outside to see what it was. And I seen them up in the tree line, and at first it just kind of looked like a blur because they're running so fast. And I tried to get my camera out in time to record them, but when I'd let my dogs out earlier that day, they heard me calling my dog. One of them's named Lady, and they were calling from the woods, Lady, trying to call my dog into the woods, and so they're starting to do that now too. They're getting comfortable enough to where they are trying to play with my dogs every chance they come across my land.
Wow, this is some wild stuff. Thank you for coming up and for sharing your experiences so far. So I do have a podcast where I talk to people about their Bigfoot encounters. Would I be able to use the audio from this conversation on that podcast?
Yeah, that'd be fine. And I
Awesome.
guess my last encounter, I'll tell you my last encounter I had with them.
Okay.
It's been probably about, it's been just a short time ago, but I was using the bathroom downstairs in my house, and I was using the downstairs bathroom, and I was doing my business, and it was talking through my wall. It was counting the 5. It was counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, trying to get me to talk back to it. And so now when I go outside, I'll say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just so they know that I'm, calling them.
Are those the only words that they're saying, or do they say other words too?
No, I heard on one other occasion, I heard them talking from, one was on the right and one was on the left in the woods. And one said, Babu Babu Ka is what it said. Babu Babu Ka. And then the other one just smacked the tree to let it know that it was talking to it.
That's wild stuff, guys. I see a lot of people in the comments saying they want to be able to see your videos. His username on TikTok is Appalachian Cryptids, but yeah, just follow him right now, and you'll be able to check it out. So
Yeah.
appreciate you coming up, man.
Yep. Have a good one, man. Keep up
You
the
too.
good work.
Thank you.
Yep.
We'll talk to you later.
Yep. Later.
Hi there. How are you?
Hi. How are you? Yeah, he's definitely real. Definitely. I'm from Massachusetts, but I have traveled on my motorcycle to the mountains in New Hampshire, Maine, Vermont, and no question in my mind. No question. Because I've heard stuff while I was camping. For 20 years, I've heard stuff. It's no doubt in my mind. No doubt in my mind that he exists.
Wow. Where have you been that you've experienced stuff out there?
Oh, geez. On a motorcycle, back in my younger days, Maine, Canada, Vermont, New Hampshire, all in the New England area. And I have heard stuff, I mean, before the days of smartphones, you could actually record stuff. I have heard stuff, I've seen stuff, and no question in my mind. No question.
Wow. Can you think of any specific instances that you might be able to share?
I can. So, oh God. So I'm 55 now, but when I was in my early 30s, I went on a motorcycle trip down the Blue Ridge Parkway through the mountains there.
Yep.
And oh God, I will never forget this night. So we went to this campsite, and we set up a camp and we fell asleep. In the middle of the night, we heard this ungodly scream, and it wasn't human. It couldn't have been human. It couldn't have been. And I looked at my boyfriend at the time. I'm like, this isn't right. This isn't a person screaming. This is like, and it screamed for like 3 minutes. This deep guttural scream, and it didn't come from a human. You know, you could tell if it comes from a human. You just know. And it did not. And it was in the Blue Ridge, the Blue Ridge Mountains. It was the scariest thing I've ever gone through, and I've never shared this experience with anyone. And it was terrifying. Like, we couldn't sleep the whole night because of it. It was like nothing I've ever heard in my entire life. And people all think we're crazy and they laugh at us, but it was nothing like my human ears I've ever heard in my entire life. It was nuts.
That area down there is really intense too.
It is. So here's the funny thing. So it was back in the 90s, and so the Unabomber here's
easy on the terms.
Oh, well,
Sorry.
Well, you know what I'm talking about. So he was
Right.
apparently hiding out in the hills during that time, and I called my mom, and I remember it distinctly. I called my mom on a payphone. I'm like, "Hey, we're here." Blah blah. It's like, "Oh, so and so is hiding out in these mountains. Gotta be careful." I'm like, "Okay, yeah, that wasn't that guy." Like, we woke up at 2 a.m. and heard this unhuman scream in the 90s, and I'll never, for the rest of my life, forget that sound in my head. It wasn't human. It definitely, it couldn't have been. So I will never forget that. And everyone laughs, and you know what? You can laugh all you want. If you didn't experience it, you don't understand what you heard. It was wild. It was wild.
Wow. I appreciate you coming up and sharing that for the first time. My goodness. Is this a conversation I could play on my Bigfoot podcast that I have?
You absolutely can if you want.
All right.
Man.
I appreciate you coming up. I've got a few other people I want to check in with, but it's been fun chatting with you tonight. Thank you.
All right, man. Take care.
You too. Hey, Mark. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Doing great. What brings you up, sir?
I actually wanted to tell you about, I saw your site. I've been on here a few times.
Okay.
I wanted to tell you about a sighting I had in Canada. My mother always took us on vacation middle of July. And this particular year, we went up to Canada and got on the Oginawa Canyon train tour. I don't know if you know where that is. That's like, you get on it in the Sioux and in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan.
Okay.
And it goes up from there just into the wilderness. It pretty much follows the border up, but goes pretty deep into the woods. Anyways, there's one spot on that rail. I was with my cousin. We were like 9 or 10, and we were standing between the rail cars. Instead of being inside the rail car, we were like standing in between them, hanging over the rail, just checking out the scenery. Well, we were coming around this, we were on this trestle. It was coming around a lake. And this lake was pretty large. And as we came around the lake on the trestle, we could see where the land was coming up, and there was like a brook that came down, a waterfall, and then went into the lake. Right next to that brook sat a blonde Sasquatch. If you've ever seen Todd Standing's photos, there's one there that's relatively blonde. It looked just like that as far as its facial features. This thing was huge, and the thing that got me was it actually was drinking water. It actually stuck its hand into the waterfall and brought it back up to its mouth and took a drink.
Wow. That's awesome.
We got to see that for quite a while. And it wasn't like, you know, I know it made eye contact with me. I could feel it, basically. But at the same time, neither one of us were in a position where we would be scared. You know? Had a few things that I thought were odd here and there, but I don't really mention them to anybody because, well, I do mention them, but they call me nuts for, thinking that I'm seeing X's or stuff like that. But anyways, I saw one other time. I live in New York now. And one other time we were traveling to a funeral on 80. It's east-west, 80, 90, going through Pennsylvania and New York. Well, we were in New York heading towards Pennsylvania. And the highway is divided, has quite a bit of land in between the two different directions of the expressway. And then it has fences beyond the expressway to keep the animals off,
Yep.
Like cow fences. But well, I was just gazing out the window because my wife was driving one day. Well, that day when we were going. And I looked over towards this barn and I saw this thing that was just it's so hard to describe because I don't know if you've ever seen a bear run. It's sort of, I don't know if they call it a barrel. It sort of barrels along because it looks like a barrel's just moving along, because you can't really see its feet. It just sort of, just because of the way it keeps its nose down. Well, this wasn't like that. It was much bigger than a bear, and I mean, it just spread its arms completely out, grabbed ground, and just, I mean, it was way on the other side of the expressway.
Okay.
Get running behind this barn. It was actually on the other side. It was on the expressway side of the fence. But it was running as close to that as it could, the opposite direction. It was, I just sort of, I didn't know what to think or say, or I know, I don't know if there's such a thing as dog man.
A lot of people think so. That's something I don't know a lot about, but I'd say it's definitely out there.
That was definitely a Sasquatch or a dogman. I mean, I don't know if dogman exists,
wow.
But I know Sasquatch exists.
The sighting you had up in Canada, what lake was that by again?
I don't know the lake. It's the railway. Was called Ogdenwa Canyon Railway. It starts at Sault Ste. Marie.
Got it.
And it should have a site, and then that site should have a map of its railway.
Okay.
On that map, you should be able to find. They might not have it on there anymore. It hits the outside corner of the lake, and there's a big trestle. And as it comes around, there's a stream that comes off into the lake. As you're going north. Anyways.
Okay. Yeah, I'll take a look. That looks interesting. Maybe we can get some more info from looking into that. But Mark, thank you for coming up and for sharing. Is this a conversation I can use on my podcast?
Oh, absolutely. And the interesting thing about this was that Sasquatch was blonde.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was butternut blonde. I mean, it was just something different. I wasn't expecting it, that's for sure. But thanks for listening to my story.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for coming up, and maybe we'll talk again at a later time. You have a good one, sir.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Bigfoot Society Podcast. Every encounter we share reminds us that the world is bigger and stranger than we think, and that the truth is often hiding just beyond the tree line. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe to the channel on YouTube, hit the bell so you don't miss the next episode, and share this with a friend who's into mysteries, monsters, or the unexplained. And if you're listening to us on Spotify or Apple Podcast, please follow the show there and leave us a 5-star positive review, because all of that helps more people discover the show. And remember, if you or someone you know has had a Bigfoot sighting, please, I'd love to hear from you. So email me at bigfootsociety@gmail.com and let's start the conversation. If you haven't gotten a chance yet, check out our membership community over at www.bigfootsocietypodcast.com. And that's where you can hear tomorrow's episode today, early and ad-free, and members-only episodes every week. Also, it's a place to connect with other people that are into the Bigfoot subject as much as you are. Thanks again for following along with the Bigfoot Society. Until next time, keep your eyes open, trust your gut, and never stop asking what else might be out there. And see you in the woods.